Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the third episode of the Law and Policy podcast. Today we have with us Zaid Hydari, who is an emerging and talented US immigration lawyer. He is a graduate of the University of Texas in Austin, more famously known as the UT Austin, and of Fordham Law School, which is located in central New York. Thank you, Zaid, so much for joining us today. Without further ado, let me get straight to the questions.
Many of my friends, my family members, and even a lot of our clients in Pakistan have on the top of their mind, which is how do you immigrate to the US? What are the pathways?
So we'll do a little bit of an overview of the landscape. I'll start with the non-immigrant visas. When I say that, I'm talking about temporary opportunities whereby these visas do not enable and allow long-term settlement, what we generally know as a green card and then a path to citizenship. In that category of the non-immigrant visas, we have a number of lettered visa categories that are very relevant for people in Pakistan or elsewhere to consider. I'll highlight a few. The E1 and E2 visas. These are for investment and for trade. So trade and investment visas. If you're running a business that does significant trade between the US and Pakistan, or if you're investing in a business in the United States as a Pakistani national, you may be eligible for an E1 or an E2, which can allow you to come to the United States to oversee that investment or that business, and even perhaps work for it. And there are certain conditions for that. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm going to hold on some of the questions. Or actually, I'll
Sure.
start with you. If you want this visa, how big should the business be that you invest in the United States?
Great question. So there is no dollar amount threshold or fixed numerical value. What it has to be is that there has to be a substantial investment. Now, there's a lot of discretion as to what that amount would be. It depends on the type of business. So it has to be assessed according to the business. If the business itself is not a very large business, then the investment can be smaller. If it's a very large scale business, then the investment is going to have to be larger. And the other two key elements that I'll highlight for that is that the money has to be at risk. So you have to have really parted with the funds and invested it in a business, and the money has to be at risk in order to be eligible for the E. The other significant factor for the E is, of course, where the funds come from. And so there will be, a substantial documentation required to show the source of funds to, obviously satisfy some of the concerns that the government has. So the E1 and the E2 are available to Pakistani nationals. Both versions of this visa are available, and it could be something that people set up a consultation to discuss further. In addition to the E, there's of course the H-1B, the H-class visas, and the H-1B is the most well-known. I'm sure everybody
In this country and actually the world over is talking about H-1B
has of course hit the headlines big time
because of Donald Trump.
Because of Donald Trump, and even prior to Donald Trump, right? This was a visa class that everyone was very much aware of. It's a specialty occupation visa. It is something that people associate usually with tech workers, right? They think, okay, those in the IT industry are going to the US and working on H-1Bs. But in reality, H-1B is a visa that spans many industries and occupations. So in addition to IT professionals, engineers, teachers, healthcare professionals, accountants, lawyers, other consultants. So any occupation that requires at least a bachelor's degree. Now, the problem with the H-1B is the numerical limits. There are only 85,000 allocated each year, and the demand is far greater than the supply, right? So we have this lottery system that is every March it's very anxiety inducing for those who are going through the process. They don't know if they're going to be selected or not. And now we're seeing huge changes being brought to this program, right? The administration is placing all kinds of potential changes and that are yet to be seen exactly how they'll play out, because some of what has been proposed is being challenged in the courts. And so we'll see over the next few months what this program looks like.
Let's get back to the overview of the multiple pathways to non-immigrant visa. So there's E and there is H-1B.
H-1B. There are a couple of others I would highlight. There's an L, which is an intra-company transfer. You're working for a company that has an affiliate subsidiary office in the U.S., and your company is transferring you within the corporation or the firm. Of note, you should have been working for the company in its foreign office for at least 1 year prior to being transferred to the U.S. So the L visa is something that is of note. There are two visas, O and P class visas, which are for usually those who are have. The O is for extraordinary sort of recognition in the arts or sciences. These are a lot of your well-recognized artists, sometimes musicians. And so if there are very talented people from these sectors who have gotten widespread recognition and are reputable, they may be eligible to get themselves an O visa, which allows for you to come to the U.S. and work usually for a fixed amount of time, up to 3 years in that space. P visas are for touring artists. So think of your bands who want to come and go on tour in the United States. A P visa would be for those individuals. And then there's the J visa, which a lot of people will also perhaps be familiar with. The J1 is actually a exchange visitor visa, where you have to be enrolled in some kind of a program.
That rings a bell because about 11 years ago, I came to the United States as a Fulbright scholar, and that's the first time I heard the word J visa, right? Because I think we had that. It was a year.
Yes, these are Fulbrights, other sponsored programs whereby, whether or not the government of Pakistan is actually sponsoring the individual to come to the U.S. and participate in that exchange program, often under the idea or the guise that you will return to Pakistan or any home country after receiving that training on your J1 in the US, and bring those skills and that training that you've acquired back to your home country. And therefore, it's something that often has a complication whereby you can't really stay on after the J1. You're supposed to go home.
I'm sure when people reach out to you as a creative and a, shall I say, mischievous lawyer, some hacks of how to get out of the J visa, right? There's one way or another.
I wouldn't even call them hacks.
I'm not going to ask you for you to disclose that secret, but answer me in yes or no. Is there some way out of it?
There are ways. There are definitely ways, and they're very much legitimate ways baked in. You can in certain circumstances.
It has to be stuff which you disclose in a consultation, which is protected by a lawyer-client privilege. So I'm not going to ask you for more on that. On the pathways, back to the pathways.
Back to the pathways, we've mostly covered them. There's a class of visas called the R visas, which are religious visas for individuals coming to the U.S. to work at least part-time as ministers or religious workers. But that, I would say, is an overview of the non-immigrant pathways. Notice that I have not mentioned B1 and I haven't mentioned F1, and that's because those are very common visa classes. The B1, B2 is your visitor visa. The F1 is your student visa. These are very common visas, but you're not. They are not for working in the U.S. They are for either just visiting, tourism, or a few business meetings, but not earning, and of course for studying in the U.S. Now, after F1 programs end, you do usually have at least a year of what's called OPT, and a period of time in which you can work in the field of which your study was in. But that too has been very much in the headlines, and I would say be very cautious thinking of B1, B2, or F1 as working visas. They are not working visas. That's pretty much the scene when it comes to coming to the U.S. temporarily and being able to either work or invest, derive some kind of compensation for what you're doing in the U.S. There are, of course, more permanent pathways. So you have green card opportunities in the U.S., which we call EB1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. There are 5 categories of these employment-based green cards that one can get for the U.S. These are numerically limited, so you have to always be looking at the availability, at whether or not there's a substantial waiting period for these. EB1 is for individuals who are at a very priority level, extraordinary abilities in their field, outstanding professors or researchers, or multinational managers, executives. So the criteria is usually it's a very high criteria for the EB1 class. The EB2 class is for those with advanced degrees, advanced degree professionals with exceptional abilities. And this is a class that some people do not have to go through a long labor certification process because they're working in a field that's in the national interest of the United States. Then there's the EB3, which is for skilled workers. The requirements are not as high when it comes to the education or ability. And this is a group that has to go through a long process of labor certification, which is essentially a process that proves that no U.S. citizen worker is available to fill that position, and that the wages are not going to drive down the compensation that would have been demanded by a U.S. worker. The fourth and fifth categories, the fourth category I'll mostly skip over. It's not very relevant. The fifth one is for investors. And there the dollar amount is very high right now. We've actually crossed over $1 million as the minimum investment that one requires in order to get a green card as part of their investment. There too, we've heard some things in the media and in the headlines because of the president's announcement of something called a gold card, which sounds a little bit like this EB5, but it's yet to be understood how it fits with our existing categories right now.
But the gold card is going to look a lot like EB5, which is basically an investment visa. If you invest $1 million, let's say you buy real estate worth $1 million in the United States, at the moment you can get an EB5, which allows you to stay there indefinitely for as long as you hold on to that property.
Correct. Now, I would hesitate to conceive of just of a property. Usually, the EB5 will need to be job creating. So your investment will need to create at least 10 jobs in the U.S. Usually.
So if you, let's say, shares in a company which employs people, then you need. But what if you buy shares on the New York Stock Exchange?
That's generally not going to do it. Think of development projects, real estate or otherwise, that are going to enable, a large scale workforce, both in order to do the construction and development, but then afterwards as well, right? So and working with an advisor who can help you identify some of these opportunities. If that's something that you're interested in. But I think back to your point about the gold card, it is going to look a bit like this EB5, but it also has implications for the EB1, because some commentators are now starting to think that what they're really saying is that if you have that much funding, you may be able to satisfy some of the requirements for the EB1 extraordinary ability visa. So let's see.
The jury's out. So these
Jury's
are
out.
immigration pathways, and we're going to make a table very soon, show it on our screen with all of them, so that those who want to sort of keep an eye can look at that screen. And let's move on to the immigration, the real thing. How do you get to the city on the hill? How do you become a member of the greatest nation on this earth? And I'm being a bit simplistic here.
Yeah, we'll see how long that title is associated. Look, those green card pathways that I mentioned, once you have, if you qualify and are able to get a green card through one of those pathways, then generally speaking, if you're able to hang on to your green card for a period of 5 years, then you become eligible to apply for naturalization, generally speaking.
Can you say that again? You get a non-immigration visa. You go to the US.
No. An immigrant visa, one of the green card pathways that we discussed, the EB1 through EB5. If you get one of those and you get your hands on a green card, generally speaking, if you're able to maintain your green card for 5 years, you then become eligible to apply for naturalization.
So it's basically an immigrant visa, and you can hold on to it for 5 years. And that's roughly the pathway to getting.
That's roughly the pathway to getting citizenship.
And the green card, what's the legal term for it? Is it permanent?
Permanent residency.
Permanent residency.
So legal permanent residency is the same thing as the green card. And the green card is a pathway in and of itself to citizenship. So it's long-term stay that allows for you to eventually apply for citizenship. Versus that first category that we talked about, the non-immigrant visas, those technically you are not on a track to stay in the US long-term. So remember, we said H-1B, H-1B workers who've been working in the US for a long period of time, sometimes 12, 15 years on an H-1B visa, they are not in possession of a green card, and they are not on a track to becoming a US citizen. Some of those visas that we talked about, the non-immigrant visas, one has to then go through a process called adjustment of status to get themselves a green card. And then once they're able to get a green card, hang on to it for 5 years and apply for citizenship. So it can be a long process, and it can be one that seems almost out of reach for some, because not everyone has the opportunity to do that adjustment of status. On the flip side, not everybody wants to. Some people are perfectly content with an e-visa that allows for them to come and go, oversee their business, manage the business a bit, and leave, or on an H-1 to work in the United States and come and go and not be subject to the tax regime. So remember, when you have a green card, you're now subject to the US tax system in a way that's very different than if you do not have a green card or you're not a US citizen. So those are also considerations that many people have, and not everybody wants a green card. But for, like you said, for those who are interested in obtaining something long-term and perhaps getting their hands on that blue passport, then you really should be thinking, okay, do I qualify for one of these EB green card pathways right away? Or am I going with a non-immigrant pathway to get myself sort of situated first, open up some opportunities for myself, and then see it as a potential long-term process of adjusting my status?
Okay.
And
can I ask you a few questions? The non-immigrant visas, what is the duration? Because I understand that now you can actually get a visit visa for 5 years, a multiple entry five-year visa. But of course, on a visit visa, you can't work, you can't do really anything there.
Yeah.
So the business visas, how long are they for?
So each one will have its own duration, depending. For example, an e-visa generally can also be issued up to for up to 5 years, although it won't always be issued for that, depending on the circumstances. And the individual can come and go during that period. For example, we talked about that's a little different. You have to have a set itinerary, a fixed itinerary that you're coming to do the work in relation to, and then you will be the visa will be issued for as long as that work is projected for. So it really depends on the class. H-1Bs generally are 6-year visas that then can be renewed indefinitely. So it's a visa specific how long it will be issued for.
I think that's a whole lot of information for me to absorb in a day. So thank you so much, Zaid, and we're going to move on to a few last questions.
Sure.
Other than the United States, what are the desirable, jurisdictions for immigration? Because there's a lot of people who are interested in having a second passport and a second citizenship, which helps them get good travel opportunities. So, as somebody who's advising people all over the world, and I'm sure your clients are spread out, what are the good options?
Yeah, it's a great question because sometimes the U.S. is just not either an option based on the qualifications, or it's not of interest. People want to know other options, and there are several good ones. Right now, we see a lot of interest in some EU jurisdictions, namely Portugal and Malta. That's because these are countries that have citizenship by investment schemes, similar to what we've talked about in the US, but the thresholds are much lower. So the amount that you have to invest are lower. Sometimes the amount of time that you have to spend in country is less time to be able to comply with the residency and to be able to get either the long-term residency or even citizenship. So we're seeing a lot of inquiries about Portugal, Malta, Cyprus, about Turkey. Also has an investment scheme. There are, of course, some jurisdictions in the Caribbean which have been getting more and more traction recently. Again, lower thresholds to be able to invest in something and acquire either a residency or even citizenship. And then there's your traditional options like Canada, the UK, Australia, which of course have their own programs that are similar but different from the US. But we have seen that in almost all of these examples, there's been a sort of more restrictive approach to immigration. So many of the programs that people were familiar with in Canada and the UK have either seen rollbacks, changes, modifications that are such that not as many people qualify right now.
Portugal, Malta, and Turkey, roughly how much investment do you need to get either PR?
The amounts that so off the top of my head, I know that basically, in the range of something like $100,000, plus minus, there's obviously ranges there, but, tens or into the hundreds of thousands, but not, up like what we talked about where, in the US, we're talking about $1 million and up, we're talking about much more modest in comparison, still, large sums of money, but generally speaking, much lower.
Something that I noticed earlier in your talk is that the documentation, that the money which you send abroad for investment, it needs to be very well documented. So, what do you mean by that? Can you elaborate?
Well, I speak mostly from the vantage point of the U.S. Like I said, source of funds is something that is extremely important. So being able to document where the funding is coming from. Is it from the sale of property? Is it from, a savings account? Is it from inheritance? Is it from, so being able to show where that money is essentially derived from, what's called source of funds, is critically important to any of these visas. Now, in these other contexts where we have less expertise but some familiarity, and we have partners that we can refer to, they will help guide us in the way of that particular jurisdiction's ruling. But I would say that there's always going to be some degree of scrutiny on the source of funds.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Zaid. And it's been a wonderful session. We hope this is the first of many. And I think those of our viewers who have any questions regarding those specific categories of visas, they'll reach out to you. They can reach out to us as well for more information. And just, before we part, some thoughts on what's happening right now. Which way is the US visa regime going? There's a lot of talk about a rollback by President Donald Trump of H-1B. You've got to pay, the company which is bringing you into the US will be paying $100,000 for just one worker. So what do you think about that? Which way are we heading?
There is a remaking of the system happening for sure. But at the end of the day, the recalibration that is happening is to try to favor U.S. workers in some way, shape, or form. But there are sectors and industries where there are huge shortages. Take, for example, in healthcare and nursing, nurses and doctors, we have a huge shortage of in the U.S. Accountants, we have a huge shortage of in the U.S., just to name a few. These are not shortages that can be addressed quickly by these policy changes. So what I mean to say by that is that skilled migration, skilled workers coming into the US, that is not going to be eliminated by any means, shape, in any way. We're going to continue to see the welcoming of skilled workers and skilled migrants into the US. Yes, there are going to be changes. It might be a little bit messy as we go through these next couple of years, but working with an advisor and with a legal representative, you should be able to navigate that just fine. Where I think people are seeing the biggest changes and the greatest scrutiny are on those who are not going through the legal process. Those individuals who have come into the US and are out of status or entered irregularly. There, we are seeing an intense pressure being placed by this administration. And that is something that we're going to see probably the most attention and pressure on.
One thing which we have not had the chance to discuss in today's podcast is asylum and how you can get asylum in the United States. And actually, that's what brought us together for the first time a few years ago.
Yeah.
So I'm going to park that thought. I don't want this podcast to be too long.
Yeah.
We're going to hope. We would love to invite you over for another talk.
Sure.
Asylum laws, not just in the United States, but just generally in the UK, in the US, EU. How do people who are facing persecution back home, how can they get asylum abroad? So, yeah.
There's a lot to talk about, but as you said, we'll keep it there. It was fantastic speaking with you, Umer. It's always a pleasure. Like you said, if people have questions, they can reach out directly, and we're happy to advise on options and evaluate options with
We're sharing our contacts on the screen in a few minutes. And thank you so much. What a pleasure.
Thank you. Thanks, Umer.
Bye. Allah Hafiz.